how many Pokemon games are there really? This may sound like a very simple question, but trust me, it's much more complicated than you may think. We often forget about it nowadays, but there is more to the video game world than just whatever is released on consoles or Steam. Mobile games, arcade games, browser games, educational games, pocket-sized games, mixed reality games, social media games, the list goes on and on. And while most of these games may not be able to run with what's to be considered the mainline Pokemon games, they still exist or existed and are Pokemon video games. Which brings me back to the question, how many are there really? And just so we're clear, while everything that is a video game is to be considered, I will only count video games that have either been made, licensed, or are in other ways to be considered official Pokemon products and games. No fan games, no bootlegs, no ROM hacks, otherwise this video would be outdated the moment I upload it, and counting all that is completely impossible, of course. Oh, and before we start, leave a comment with a prediction of how many games we'll end on. I'm curious what you guys expect. Alright then, let's get started with the easiest bunch, the mainline games. Now, usually when talking about these titles, I and everyone else in the world couples them together. But if we're being pedantic, which we are today, then there is no denying that Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield are different games. They are partnered games, they are very similar games, but they are different. Different cover art, different name, different title screen, different content, different games. By that logic, we start off with our counter at 37. But there are immediately a few contentious things we need to discuss and have not yet been included. For Generation 1 I have so far counted red, blue and yellow of course, but in Japan there is green as well, which is identical to the Japanese version of red, which is not the same thing as our Western Pokemon Red. Our Western Pokemon Red and Blue are known in Japan as the third version, Pokemon Blue. So how do we count this? Western Pokemon Red and Blue are different games compared to the Japanese Red and Green. Red and Blue are localized versions of the Japanese Pokemon Blue. So I think it's best if we consider the Japanese Red and Green to be unique games, but not Japanese Blue, because Western Red and Blue are simply localizations of the Japanese Blue. Still with me? I told you it wouldn't be easy, and we haven't even left the main series yet. That then puts our counter at 39, now with 2 Japan exclusive games. But there is another contentious one, and on the complete opposite end of the series timeline in fact. Pokemon Legends ZA has a Switch 1 and Switch 2 version, which do have distinct box arts, logos and technically titles, as Pokemon Legends ZA Nintendo Switch 2 Edition is the official title of the enhanced version. But content-wise, they are completely identical, and the Switch 2 card even works in the Switch 1 as the Switch 1 game. So by that logic, if you buy only the Switch 2 version, you actually have both games. Or in other words, this is one game, meaning we are at a nice around 40 after the entire main series. I'm not gonna name them all, you surely know what they are. Let's broaden our horizon beyond the main series and look at games that can interact with the main series titles and are developed by one of the 3 companies that make up the Pokemon Company, being Nintendo, Game Freak and Creatures. First of all, another Japan exclusive, being Pokemon Stadium, the original Japanese version. Another game under this title was later released worldwide, but this is actually a localized version of the Japanese Pokemon Stadium 2. You guessed it, that means the worldwide Pokemon Stadium 2 is actually the Japanese Pokemon Stadium Gold and Silver, and per the precedent set by Red and Green, all 3 of those count separately, putting us at 43. We then add the 2 OR games, Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness, developed by Genius Sonority, which is owned by the Pokemon Company nowadays, as well as Pokemon Box, Ruby and Sapphire, which is barely a game in a traditional sense, but it does just enough to qualify as a video game. The Wii adds Pokemon Battle Revolution and My Pokemon Ranch to the count, the 3DS has Pokemon Dream Raider and Pokemon Bank, and the Switch has Pokemon Home, putting our counter at 51 video games. We're still very much in the you probably know this zone, but now we reach the first moments where I may get to surprise you a little, as we add every spin-off game released on a Nintendo platform to the mix. The oldest Pokemon spin-off series is the Pikachu series, which started with Hey You Pikachu on Nintendo 64. It then received a sequel, Pokemon Channel, on the GameCube, and the Wii had 2 spiritual successors, you could say, in the 2 Pokepark titles. So that's 4 games, 55 in total now. 2 Pokemon trading card games were released on Game Boy Color, with the second one never leaving Japan, but that doesn't mean it doesn't count. We of course have more Pokemon TCG games to cover later, but since those all weren't released on Nintendo platforms, I'm skipping them for now. There is however also Pokemon card game How to Play DS, a Japan exclusive game that, well, it teaches you how to play the Pokemon card game on the DS. The name kinda spoils the beginning, middle and ending. But it definitely still counts, no denying that. So with 3 TCG titles added, we're at 58. The Game Boy Color also got the first Pokemon pinball game, which later received a sequel for the GBA, so that's another 2 titles. Also for the Game Boy Color we have Pokemon Puzzle Challenge, which can be considered a sort of sequel to Pokemon Puzzle League for Nintendo 64, which was actually only a Pokemon game in the West originally, but hey, if Japan only counts, so does Western only. More sub-series consisting of 2 games are Pokemon Picross for SNES and 3DS, Pokemon Snap for Nintendo 64 and Switch, and Pokemon Trozei for DS and 3DS, putting our total at 68 games. More simple inclusions are the 3 Pokemon Ranger games, the original, Shadows of Almia and Guardian Signs, 5 different Pokemon Rumble games, the original for WiiWare, Rumble Blast, Rumble U, Rumble World, and Rumble Rush, the latter of which is actually a mobile game, but let's add it here, putting us at 76. Then we have some more standalone games to add, like Pokemon Dash, Pokemon Quest and Pokemon Typing Adventure, all for the DS, Pokemon Art Academy and the Japan exclusive The Thieves and the Thousand Pokemon for 3DS, and Pokemon Quest, Pokemon Cafe Remix, Pokemon Friends and Pokemon Unite for Switch. We're now at 85 games, the perfect moment to talk about some spin-off series with contentious entries. The first one is probably one you immediately recognized I haven't mentioned yet. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Let's start with the easy ones again. Red and Blue Rescue Team, Explorers of Time, Darkness and Sky, Gates to Infinity, Super Mystery Dungeon and Rescue Team DX put the total count at 93. Then you add the Japan exclusive WiiWare games. Keep Going Blazing Adventure Squad, Let's Go Stormy Adventure Squad and Go For It Light Adventure Squad, and we're at 96. But now there is one more game we need to have a little talk about. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Gold Rescue Team. This name probably means nothing to you and it sounds like a completely unique game. And in a way it kinda is, because this is an official Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game for PC. It was exclusively released in South Korea and could be downloaded in the weeks leading up to the release of the original 2 Mystery Dungeon games. This all sounds like it should count as a separate game. However, Gold Rescue Team is a demo of Blue Rescue Team that goes up until meeting Xatu, and therefore has the exact same content. The only difference is that it's now playable on PC, and is a version of Blue Rescue Team that has only one screen, like Red Rescue Team. However, I don't think that is enough of a difference. Being playable on PC is very unique, but this situation mirrors Legend ZA quite closely, and that was counted as one game. As such, Gold Rescue Team is considered the same game, partly as Blue Rescue Team, and therefore does not count separately. Something very similar is the case for the Detective Pikachu series. Prior to the first game releasing worldwide, a demo was released in Japan, only known as Great Detective Pikachu: Birth of a New Duo. It is vital to acknowledge though that this game is only a demo in retrospect. The demo released 2 years before the original Detective Pikachu did, and so is more of a standalone proof of concept that in hindsight became a demo, rather than simply a part of the game. But on the other hand, everything that makes up Great Detective Pikachu is in Detective Pikachu 1 as the first few chapters. There is nothing unique about the 3DS eShop exclusive. And while the fact that this is a Japan-only, very short tryout game makes it very easy to say, oh yeah, we just won't count it, let me remind you, technically speaking, this situation is nearly identical to what happened with Pokken Tournament. The Wii U version is 1-for-1 included in the Switch version. It's just on different consoles, yet I would imagine that most of us consider these two to be different games. Not to mention there's also the Pokken arcade game, of which the Wii U version is actually already a port. So the way I see it, as weird as it may feel in hindsight now, as Great Detective Pikachu ended up just being a Detective Pikachu demo, I do think it needs to count as a separate game, on the basis that it's not a stripped down version of the game. For 2 years it was the only Detective Pikachu game out there in the world, which is substantial enough for me to count it. Same goes for Pokken. Both the original and the X count separately, and when we then add the Detective Pikachu game for Switch as well, we have a total game count of 101. There is one more Contentious spin-off series, at least at first sight, and it serves as the perfect bridge towards our new category. Pokémon Shuffle released on 3DS in February 2015 and was later that year accompanied in its series by Pokémon Shuffle Mobile. The title strongly implies this is merely a mobile port, and that isn't untrue, but it's not the exact same game either. There are differences, not many and nothing substantial, but there is content changed, removed, added, altered. It's not a one-for-one port. However, when looking at the list of changes, it reads a bit too much like the version differences Legends EA has on Switch 1 versus Switch 2. It is more than that, let me be clear about it, but personally I don't think the mobile version does enough to warrant it being counted as a separate version. The difference may be bigger than Legends EA, but it's not close to say Pokémon Gold and Silver either, and unlike Great Detective Pikachu, the 3DS version was also the only version for just a few months, not 2 whole years. They ended content at the same time with the exact same content incorporated, and only in the very early game did the mobile version have slightly different Pokémon data, like catch rates or stage rewards. So to conclude, we stay at 102 with only one Pokémon Shuffle added. But with that, we have opened the floodgates for Pokémon mobile games, which fortunately don't have too many contentious names to talk about, but there is a goldmine of unknown games here that you have probably never heard about. For example, the first official Pokémon mobile game dates back to 2006 and is Japan exclusive. Pokemade was developed by Square Enix and only available on the Docomo 90X series of phones, which were also Japan exclusive themselves. The game used Gen 3 sprites and allowed you to catch Pokémon by sending and receiving emails. Not text messages, only emails. It was a different time. But some things apparently never change, because this game also had microtransactions. You could purchase a Pokemade membership to receive more Pokeballs to catch more Pokémon. Early adapters in more ways than one. The first mobile game to be released for modern smartphones was also Japan exclusive. Pokémon Say Tap is a rhythm game using the Pokémon trading card game, a novel concept that wasn't enough to last it longer than a few months. Yeah, this game was only available from July 2011 to September 2011. But that doesn't make it any less of a video game. Let's speedrun through some names you may recognize, like Pokémon Go, Magikarp Jump, Pokémon Jewel, Pokémon Masters EX, Pokémon Smile and Pokémon Sleep. That puts our total count at 110 games now. A very difficult one to figure out is another sort of series, being the Pokedex 3D titles. First of all, do these qualify as games? They really barely are, and while they can definitely be entertaining, the same goes for apps like Pokemon TV, which has the anime on it, and I think we can all agree that shouldn't count. Now, the Pokedex 3D games are interactive to a very minor extent, but they mostly serve as a Pokemon encyclopedia in app form. In a different time, this would have probably been a book, and we wouldn't have counted it. Hell, there are also downloadable Pokemon strategy guides on mobile devices, and I also don't count those, so I'm leaning towards not counting them. If you do think they should count though, the question how they should count is also contentious. We have the first Pokedex 3D, which is only the Gen 5 dex, and was later removed and replaced by Pokedex 3D Pro, which is a national dex, and therefore, once again, contains every single piece of content the original game had and completely replaced it on the 3DS eShop. Pokedex 3D Pro was then ported to iOS under the name Pokedex 3D for iOS, but several generations were locked away and had to be bought separately, so whether this can still be considered a one-to-one port is definitely up in the air. If I were to count it, I would say all Pokedex 3D titles should all be combined into one entry. They're not different enough to count separately. But like I said, I don't think Pokedex 3D should count. It's not a game, and it doesn't directly connect to a game either, like Pokemon Home for example does, so therefore we stay at 110. But we are still far from done, even in just the mobile landscape. We're about to dive in for some really deep cuts, starting with a few that at least released in the West. Camp Pokemon, or Pokemon Camp, depending on your region, actually never came to Japan, as it was more or less a mobile app version of the English Pokemon website, complete with all kinds of different little games. These games used to be separate, but were now bundled into one app, and that app certainly qualifies as a game. This exact role was later taken over by a new app, Pokemon Playhouse, which, as such, also qualifies as a video game. But what about Pokemon Wave Hello? This was an app for Android phones, but really only meant to be used on Google Pixel 4. It was super bare bones and allowed you to interact in very simple ways with either Pikachu, Eevee or one of the Galar starters. Calling this bare bones is honestly an understatement, but I cannot say it isn't a game. It's meant to be entertaining to some extent, it's interactive, it has very minor gameplay elements in a vein similar to Hey You Pikachu. It is a game. A very, very stripped down one, but it is a game somewhere. It counts. 113 games then, when we look at mobile titles that were Japan exclusive. Such as Dancing Pokémon Band, a rhythm game that was released paired with the Pikachu short, Pikachu and the Pokémon Music Squad, which in and of itself was paired with the movie Hoopa and the Clash of Ages. But yeah, it's a rhythm game, it certainly counts. 99 Quests, elementary school mathematics app Pocket Monsters version, is an educational game that is meant to teach children math. And while it is easy to look at this and laugh, there is absolutely no denying that this here is an educational game. It's not an educational tool, and it's not an educational book, it's an educational game, and that means it qualifies. The same goes for Learn Real English through Pokemon, X and Y translation scope. The main selling point of this educational app was that it served as a guide for Japanese people to play Pokemon X and Y in English and learn English that way, which is honestly a phenomenal idea. Take it from someone who taught himself English through playing Pokemon as a kid, this works much better than Duolingo. This app also has quizzes and actual interactive content though, so it scrapes by through the minimum required to be considered an educational game. Just like Pokemon Shuffle was the perfect bridge between Nintendo systems and mobile devices, the Pokemon TCG games make the perfect segue into a new system to discuss: PC games. Because yeah, Pokemon, despite being a Nintendo series, does have games for PC. On mobile there is of course now Pokemon TCG Pocket and also Pokemon TCG Live, which is a direct replacement of Pokemon TCG Online, but it is not at all the same game. The latter two released on both mobile and PC, but there are actually also TCG games exclusive to PC. Pokemon Card Game Online can be seen as the predecessor to TCG Online, in that it was a Japan-exclusive browser game that allowed you to play TCG matches, albeit only with cards of the Leafeon vs Metagross expansion pack CDs. It's very basic, but it's undoubtedly a game. Even earlier, Pokemon Play It had also brought the TCG to Windows worldwide even, although this title did focus more on teaching you the TCG to then play it offline. But still, you can play games against the CPU, it certainly counts. The second version was also later released, but the only difference is on bug fixes, so this version 2, despite having a new name, does not count as a separate game. Which now puts us at 121 games going into PC titles proper. Let's start with probably the most well-known browser game in the Pokemon series, Pokemon Dream World. This game was linked with the Gen 5 titles and allowed you to send Pokemon from your DS to the internet and kind of hang out, sort of similar to a virtual pet simulator, which is often considered a genre of video game. However, even though this game is very much its own thing, with its own title, platform and gameplay, you cannot play it without owning a Gen 5 game. You could make an account without a copy of the game, but you couldn't play it. And therefore, I don't think this should count separately. It is essentially an add-on to Black and White and their sequels, browser-based DLC if you will. If it doesn't work independently, it shouldn't count as a separate entry. Time to get into the thick of the Pokemon PC world, and it shouldn't surprise you, most games here are not exactly Game of the Year material. But a game is a game regardless of quality or size, and that means we won't discriminate. Even a super bare-bones Flash game is still an official Pokemon game, as long as it can or could be played independently from other games. For example, Pokemon Masters Arena released in North America in 2001 and was a compilation of 8 minigames. These minigames obviously don't count separately, but Pokemon Masters Arena does count for one entry. But on the other hand, when the series turned 10 in 2006, Purdue Farms, a US company that makes meat products, partnered with Pokemon to release 3 mini-discs that each contained a minigame. You had Pokemon Team Rocket Blast Off, Pokeball Launcher and Seek and Find. These were playable independently from one another, and therefore they're not one game, even if they are part of the same promotion. They're 3 games and count separately. As you may have noticed, almost all of these games are themed after the anime. That is the case for almost all of these titles, they lean heavily on whatever was going on with the anime at the time. One of the earliest examples is Pokémon the Movie 2000 Adventure, a first-person adventure game based on the second movie. It was actually very successful and was downloaded more than 1 million times in its first month, despite being North America exclusive. Because yeah, it may have been a downloadable title, but it used a special browser to work, which was only available in the US. The game was published by Warner Brothers, who had the rights to the movie and had this game made to promote it, but Nintendo was worried it might hurt sales of the mainline games and thus shut it down. However, make no mistake, this was a game released by the license owner of the Pokémon the Movie 2000. Just like all these other games did officially license the anime rights from whoever had bought them from the Pokémon company at the time of release. It was official, well within the rights to use Pokémon, and therefore it counts. In the same year, Pokérom was released, an educational game released by Mattel and the Learning Company, but officially licensed from 4Kids, who owned the anime rights at the time. The game even features Stuart Zacknett, the voice of Professor Oak, as the professor in-game, just like Pokémon Snap and Pokémon Puzzle League. It also definitely qualifies as an educational game. It has an entire multiplayer board game inside it. Pokémon PC Master, a Japan-exclusive PC title, does not though, for this is simply an educational tool to help kids learn how PCs work. Another PC game based on the anime rights is Pokémon Team Turbo, another minigame collection that I actually had at the time, which per my research is actually a massive revelation. There's not a single source out there on the internet who says this game was released outside of North America, but I 100% played this and I'm from Europe. No idea how that worked and I can't remember the details either, but hey, the game released, that's all that matters. Also based on the anime is the huge list of Pokémon Flash games. There have been several official websites with these little games on it, and they all count as long as they are interactive games, which by far the most of them are. However, over time, many games have been reused between sites, as the rights often changed. For example, from 1990 to 2006, Pokémon Flash games were hosted on the Kids WB website. It then changed to Yahoo Kids in Japan and Cartoon Network in the US, though at the same time, the official Western Pokemon.com and Japanese Pokemon Daisuki Club websites also had Flash games. I won't bore you with the exceptionally long list of Flash games that once existed, from Patrat's Secret Touch to Pounding Jigsaw, which is not an adult version of Saw, but instead a Jigsaw game with Wynot and Wobbuffet. In total though, Kids WB had 2 exclusive Pokémon Flash games, Cartoon Network had 3, Yahoo Kids had 13, including Pokémon Garden, which you may have heard about, Pokemon Daisuki Club had 12, and Pokemon.com had a total of 45. That puts us now at a total of 203 official Pokémon video games. And we're still not done. Pokémon Battle Chess is a physical board game that combines chess and the Japanese shogi into a new game played with Pokémon pieces. It could also be played digitally in browsers via Pokémon Battle Chess Web, which is our 204th game. Pokémon Roll Call Rhythm Game is a game of unknown genre that was exclusively released in Hong Kong and Taiwan to promote the Let's Go games. It's based on the song Pokémon Roll Call, which is the credits theme in the Cantonese version of the Pokémon anime. But hey, Pokémon game released by the official rights holders of the anime, it is an official Pokémon game. It is, however, a very niche and local Pokémon game, but it's actually not the only one of its kind there. More official Pokémon games were released for weird systems, or in this case, very small areas. The smallest is probably Pokepark Fishing Contest DS, which was, as the name suggests, a DS game exclusively available at Japanese Pokémon events and locations, such as the Pokepark, Pokémon Centers and other events. During the course of the day you had to try and catch the largest fish Pokémon, and whoever set the highest score was the winner. A total of 3 Pokémon games based on the anime were released for the Sega Pico, an edutainment console developed by Sega, who was still a rival of Nintendo at the time, but that apparently didn't stop Pokémon from spreading its content everywhere. These games are quite similar to what the West got on PC, minigame collections with an educational twist based on the anime. Another game was released for the Coco Pad, another Japan-only edutainment console by Sega, as well as another 4 games for the Advanced Pico Bina, which was the Switch 2 to the Pico Switch 1. So, thanks to the Pico line of systems, we're now at 214 games. In a more modern ecosystem, we need to acknowledge Pikachu Talk for Google Home and Amazon's Alexa. This allows you to talk to Pikachu, similar to Hey You Pikachu, but unlike Pokemon Wave Hello, this one is so incredibly bare bones that I don't think it can be considered a game. It is interactive, but there really is no game element whatsoever, and these devices are also not capable of that in the first place. We do have Pokemon Tower Battle and Pokemon Medallion Battle though, games exclusive to Facebook Gaming. Trust me, we've counted much more basic and much simpler games, so these certainly qualify beyond a shadow of a doubt, especially since they were published by the Pokemon Company. With 216 on the counter, we dive into our next subcategory: self-contained handheld devices and minigame consoles. This is where we find the infamous Pokemon Mini, essentially just a small Pokemon-only handheld gaming console that had several Pokemon games released for it, which were in practice mere minigames or minigame collections. 10 titles in total came to the Pokemon Mini, including Pokemon Tetris, Pokemon Party Mini and Pinball Mini, as well as Pokemon Breeder Mini, a virtual pet game. In this same genre, there were also several self-contained devices. Pokemon Pikachu is the first, released in 1998. This is effectively just a handheld with a Pikachu trapped inside, using mechanics similar to what we saw in Pokemon Yellow. You don't need Yellow at all though, so it counts. It was followed up by Pokemon Pikachu 2 GS, released accompanied with Gold and Silver. This device could connect with the Gen 2 games and send collected items over, but once again you didn't need the Game Boy Color games to play with your Pikachu. This device was also remade when the Gen 2 games were, as a pedometer known as the Pokewalker. However, this device does not work without Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and therefore, like Pokemon Dream World, does not count as a separate entry. The latest release in this genre came in 2019, when Pokemon collaborated with Bandai to make Eevee X Tamagotchi, a Tamagotchi game where you care for an Eevee. That puts us at 229 games, going into the last category of this video, the arcade. 3 different publishers have released arcade cabinets with Pokemon games. The most well-known are undoubtedly courtesy of Takara Tomy, which is ironic since that's the least known company out of the 3. They developed the Pokemon Batrio series, arcade games in the style of Pokemon Stadium that focus entirely on battling. It's so popular in Japan, it's an entire series of its own, and has even received a manga adaptation. Currently, this series is on entry number 5. After Batrio, there were Treda, Gaole, Mesostar, and most recently Frenda. Takara Tomy also developed another arcade cabinet known as Pokemon Card Game Gacha, which allows you to get TCG cards through playing minigames and therefore also qualifies. Bandai Namco also has a long history of developing Pokemon arcade games, but whether those should all count is much more contentious. The Batrio series is undoubtedly a video game, but Bandai Namco also has several cabinets that are much lighter on the virtual aspect. For example, their first creation, Dance Pikachu, is a rhythm game, but it isn't virtual. The dancing Pikachu you have to follow is an actual toy. In total, Bandai Namco has made 5 arcade games that have a screen and use virtual elements, being Pokemon Wobbuffet Fell Down, Pokemon Tug of War, Pokemon Meadow World, Pokemon Battle 9, and Pokemon Megaget. Keep in mind, I'm not counting Pokken here because I already counted that one. Sega is the third developer of Pokemon arcade cabinets, and they have produced 2. The first of which was a photo booth, which is not a game, but the second, Pokemon Koragorena, definitely is a video game. It's another meadow game as are common in Japan, so it's hardly a Pokemon Batrio, but it definitely still counts. And that finally puts our total counter at 241 officially licensed Pokemon video games. And in an effort to future-proof this video, let's already add Pokemon Pokopia and Pokemon Champions, which are both confirmed to be releasing later this year, putting us at 243 games officially revealed at the moment of writing. Considering this is an anniversary year, it won't be long before more are added, I'd imagine, but from here on out you'll have to do the math yourself. But how did your initial prediction fare? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.